Namaste, namaskar. For me, and for much of the tradition, yoga is much more than just the mat and just the physical exercises that we do. Yoga is actually much more than that. And I wanted to talk about that and the different kinds of yoga, actually. I also, on a more general note, wanted to have more types of this content, which is actually my experience of yoga and talking about it in the tradition as I've studied it, as opposed to just me flowing through a vinyasa, which I'll be doing as well. But basically, yoga actually goes way back into the ascetic tradition in ancient India, which is Tantra, just means technique in Sanskrit. But this is the tradition that brought yoga kind of out of the mountains in spiritual retreat, which was just sitting poses. There's actually only a few poses. There's about 12 in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is like the text on Hatha Yoga. They're all meditation postures. All the stuff we see now actually came later after they brought it into the marketplace, into the common folk, and Hatha Yoga was born there. So Hatha Yoga was the more vigorous, physiological, fitness-based tradition that arose out of that. So we have different kinds of yoga, and yoga itself is something that transcends meditation and physical exercises because it means union. Yoga means to yoke. Yuj or yog is the root word in Sanskrit. It means to yoke together, to unify. And so yoga actually means union, and there's many types of yoga. A relationship is yoga. Your work, your relationship to your purpose and uniting with that is yoga. Your family is a type of yoga because you're all linked together with blood and you were actually born out of another human. There's a yoga with your mother. There's a yoga with your father. And so yoga actually is a philosophy and a way of life, not a religion, more of a science. It's a science philosophy of the mind and body. And so we've talked about Tantra. So Tantra just means technique. It's a more ancient tradition. It's evolved into more, sensual and actually external practices as opposed to withdrawing the senses. It actually exfoliates the senses. So we have Tantra, we have Hatha, which Hatha Yoga later gets adapted more by Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga, there's kind of two kinds. There's the Patanjali Ashtanga Yoga, which Ashtanga just means eight-limbed or eight limbs. And so Patanjali had that system. But later on, we get Ashtanga Yoga in the tradition of Iyengar and Pattabhi Jois, who studied with those teachers. That was a much more physical, kind of almost militaristic, has been my experience, type of yoga. And so then we have Vinyasa, which we all know and love, which is the flow kind of yoga. And then there's several other kinds. There's Karma Yoga, which is the yoga of action and like dharmic action. There's Bhakti Yoga, which is the yoga of love, devotion, and celebration. And then there's Jnana Yoga, which is the yoga of the intellect, the yoga of scholastic scholarship and study. And so there's many different sects and pathways in yoga, but it very much transcends the mat and just those physical practices. So yeah, yoga for me has been really a life philosophy, I would say, is the most beneficial component. Besides having a healthy body, a life philosophy is my biggest takeaway. And so that's why yoga to me means much more than the mat. Thank you for joining.